After finishing lesson, or we are still doing lesson 4, aren't we? Do you remember where we stopped? We finished. We haven't finished that. Yes, but we were talking about the different forms and types of wahi, right? And we will revisit, just as a reminder. We talked that there are different ways where Allah communicates with the prophets. For example, Allah communicates with just an idea and being inspired that this is from God, like a message. And they are certain about it. It's a difference. We are also inspired, but sometimes our certainty is not 100%. The prophets are inspired with the message of God, direct, and they are certain 100% that this is it. Right? So because it's wahi and we haven't tasted it, what it means, we can't really say. But in the case of the prophets, it's a wahi, and they know that it's a wahi, and it's not just a sort of an inspiration or in the fashion that we have, for example. Sometimes it's a verbal communication, like a proper verbal communication from God to the prophet, right? And the Quran also talks about it, Then sometimes it's behind the veil, like Hazrat Musa, we said. Hazrat Musa, behind the veil, the wahi was revealed to. Or through an angel, as we said, Jibreel came in a form of a human being as he arrived here in this earth, because he took a form. Or the messengers visiting Prophet Lut after visiting Hazrat Ibrahim, for example. So in a form, nice clothing, very fashion. They were like, wow, these are human beings. It looks like human beings with good clothing and stuff. Or sometimes Udahiya Kalbi as well. When the beautiful young lad Jibreel came, other people also saw that Udahiya Kalbi is known as this. Or like a bell, as we said, like very strong, and this was the most strongest to the Prophet, as they say. The other discussion that we have, when I think, if you remember, or we have reached there, is in regards to the, you might remember when I give you the example, is in regards to the immunity of the Quran, is in regards to the protection of the Quran. It is intact, it hasn't been changed, it is in one piece. Although many Orientalists have tried to bring about certain proofs of discussion that certain things are added, certain things are subtracted. Among the Shia traditions as well, you may find some narrations. Sula Kafi, there were 40 Jews, not 30 Jews. 10 of the Jews were eaten by the goat of Abu Bakr and things like that. But these hadith, these narrations that are there, those are for the scholars to really discuss. The overwhelming, or both the Shia and the Sunni, they all agree that no. نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَاهُ ذِكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. We have revealed the book and we are the protector of it. God clearly mentioned it, because there was a pattern of distortion in the message of God. Now God, He Himself took that charge. And we mentioned that إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ is the same. It has the same sort of lahan, same sort of format, or where God says that I am the protector of the book, and also I am the protector of the Ahl Bayt. Now this protection, as we said, is not because that it is weak, right? Quran is much stronger than Bible. Quran is much stronger than Torah. But the importance of the Quran compared to other texts, the importance of Ahl Bayt compared to other prophets. All prophets are masoom, but the thorough purification and thorough protection is for the Ahl Bayt alayhimus salam. It's like a king, he himself goes to welcome the guest instead of sending some of his ministers, because it is of ahmiyat. They are of ahmiyat. The Quran is of ahmiyat. The Quran is something that is originated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself. As God says, but God bears witness that what He has sent down He has sent from His own knowledge. It's not As some of the Orientalists say that Prophet had some dreams, or he has visions, or he witnessed certain things, then he was speaking. He is interpreting his visions or his dreams. But no, it is exactly the knowledge of God. It comes from the knowledge of God, not the knowledge of the Prophet. Not Prophet is interpreting something based on his intellectual capacity as such. And perhaps due to this very reason, he was famous for being ummi, being illiterate, not gone to any school. This was also, God's sort of way of delivering the message through the Prophet, through a person who have never been to any maktab, who haven't been to any school officially. The Quran involved actual words itself. Every letter and word of the Quran is sacred. That's why we are not supposed to touch, for example, in terms of the state of najasa, in the state of impurity or not having wudu, right? So even the words and the chemistry or the fashion that it has been placed is not from the Prophet, is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. And this is quite unique and special in regards to the Quran. And many may say that, it is either the Prophet and the companions, they are writing it, unlike how you find in the Gospel. The ashab, of the Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, they had their own Gospel, their own interpretation, their own versions, different versions of Bible. That's what we see. It's not exactly what, for example, God mentioned to Hazrat Isa in a form of a wahi, right? And they wrote it exactly the same as they did in the Quran. So therefore, the belief of Muslims, Allah Tabai says that concerning the revelation is based on the Quran, is that the text of the Quran is the actual speech of God transmitted to the Prophet by one of his chosen angel. And when we are talking about angels as well, we said the different types of wahi and angels and how the Quran came. And Jibreel was not for every person, or not for every prophet who brought the message. He is a special angel. For certain prophets he came, right? Now, even the Quran also supports its own argument that it is literally a text in Arabic. جعلنا قرآنا عربيا. I have made this Quran in Arabic. And it calls as kitab. هذا الكتاب is a book. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. Read. Reading is when you have a text, right? So اقرأ, as it begins with اقرأ, as the Quran is known as, where literally means something which is readable. So you read when you have a text. So the Prophet is reading exactly those words and sentences which was given to him, or which was shown to him, by God. Alif Lam Ra Kitabun Uhkimat, Kitab as a book. Ayatuhu Thumma Fussilat Min Ladun Hakiman Khabira. Alif Lam Ra, this is a book whose signs have been made definitive and then elaborated from one who is all wise, or known as Suhuf. Suhuf as a book. Once again, Suhuf is known as a book. And the Quran talks, or Kalamullah. God talks it as Kalamullah. Once again, Kalam is a letter, is a word, is not. Or Qawl. Inna sanulqi alayka al-qawlan thaqila. We shall charge you with a speech of thaqil, have heavy. Thaqlain and thaqil, heavy. Qira'ah, for example, certain verbs are used instead of not the word itself, but verbs are also used which indicates that it must be a text. The Quran must be a text. Like, for example, فَإِذَا قَرَأَنَهُ, when you recite, for example, when you read, follow its reading. قَرَأَنَهُ, or for example, تِلْكَ آيَاتٌ نَتْلُوهَا عَلَيْكَ بِالْحَقِّ. natlu is from that tilawat, which points out to, for example, that when it's a tilawat, when it's a reading, it has to be a text. So Quran also supports the argument and there are numerous riwayat which says that it is a text, it is a book from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every word of it is sacred, is from God. Then as the author moves on to the next chapter, hopefully you have the book pretty soon, inshallah, maybe by the month of Ramadan, hopefully. He gets into the discussion where the Quran is something that is very clear. It is not a text that no one can understand, right? It is clear and understood by everybody in every period, by common person as well. It's not like a book which is specifically for people who are PhDs in spirituality, like a physiology book or these type of books who could understand and then teach, become a doctor, and then, for example, other people benefit from. No, but rather it is something which is very clear and everyone can really understand, and that's what it means. I mean, if Quran is the guide, it should be understood by everybody. If I go to some place to visit, even if that be China, I would take a guide who is English speaking to understand the Great Wall of China, rather than I take a guide who is speaking in Chinese, right? So the person should understand, and it is very clear. Yes, of course, the Chinese guy is translating, now the Arabic is translated, I understand it. Certainly we have made the Quran simple for the sake of understanding, for the sake of admonishment. So is there anyone who can admonish, for a dhikr? لَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ, Quran as a reminder, as فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِّرِ, are there any who would basically take that reminder? In huwa illa dhikra lil alamin. Certainly it is considered as a reminder for us. In another verse it says, indeed we have made it simple in your language so that they may take sort of dhikr, admonition, reminder. فَإِنَّمَا يَسَّرْنَاهُ بِلِسَانِكَ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَذَكَّرُونَ. Now obviously, as we discussed earlier, why it's in Arabic, because it required it to be, because of the richness of the language, and many factors were there, the need of humanity, the place where it was revealed. Many factors were there, for it to be in Arabic or where it was revealed as well. And what was required to be sent, it was during the lifetime of the Prophet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within that lifetime of the Prophet have sent what is required for mankind. As they say, otherwise Prophet should have lived for a longer period of time so that the message should be complete. So a complete and clear message from God is delivered in the Quran. We have put forth for men in this Quran every kind of parable, in order that they may receive, sort of tadakkur, reminder, or understanding. Now, obviously, you may ask, what about the ayat mutashabihat, ambiguous verses, as the scholars talk about? Now, the ambiguous verses are not considered to be verses which are mujmal. Mujmal is a term that they use in usul, that we don't have a clear understanding of it. Like, for example, there's a term they use, nas, which means it's for a hukum to be wajib or haram or whatever, there's a nas. It's a clear cut message from God in the Quran that it is not allowed or is allowed or whatever. That's called nas. Right? And there is a bit lower, there is zahir, apparent meaning of things. Based on that apparent meaning, a verdict is passed and what is understood. But there is another which is considered to be mujmal. Mujmal is completely ambiguous unless or until these mujmalat or this ambiguity is cleared with certain elements of support. Right? So there is some support to really make this ambiguity clear, which is against the zahir, khilaf zahir. And if there be some evidence, then obviously these mujmalat is accepted. Now, when it comes to the Quran, we don't say there is anything mujmal, because we say the zahir of Quran is hujjat. The ambiguous nature is the in-depth understanding of these verses. But if this in-depth the ambiguousness is in regards to the in-depth understanding. Now this in-depth understanding is against the zahir, we don't accept. So the ambiguity is not mujmal. It's not mujmal. I mean, both are same and they are translated as ambiguous. Mujmal is also kind of ambiguous, translated as ambiguous. But and even the the mutashabih, similar, verses are also translated as mujmal, mutashabih as well, ambiguous as well. Because, like for example, it's ambiguous. Like if God says, Yadullah fawqa aydim, I have my hand over. Does God have hand? It's kind of like mutashabih, it's ambiguous. Right? But at the same time, God says, Laysa kamithlihi shay. Right? So the ambiguity have different levels of interpretation and understanding, which cannot be against the zahir. Right? Like for example, some urafa tend to interpret as the Quran as the Day of Judgment. Maybe you might have done this in aqaid, eschatology. They say there is the day of resurrection is on two levels, on the microcosmic level and on the macrocosmic level. On the microcosmic level, there is a day of judgment, which they interpret that when a person dies, Qiyamat is qaim, which is considered as Qiyamat Sughra. Qiyamat Sughra, Qiyamat Kubra. Qiyamat Sughra is when a person dies. Qiyamat Kubra, they say on the day of judgment it will happen. Right? Now, but some of the urafa, they say that, okay, Prophet have said, die before you die. So the first death, the microcosmic death, is while living I die. So Qiyamat Sughra have taken place for me. And Qiyamat Kubra is when I really die. And when I die and when the earth talks about, for example, the stars or the lights, the sun will be put off. Idha shamsu kuwirat. It is actually after I die, my eyes will bust, my bones will shackle, where the mountains will shake, for example, right? So they interpret the Qiyamat verses, the day of resurrection verses, like for example, Ard means your body. So when it says that when the earth goes through a shaking, it is actually when the body in the grave is going through a shaking. It's not actually something like that will happen, for example, right? Some may interpret in this fashion. But however, as this goes, but where do you get this from? They say, oh, this is inspirational. It's orafai, sort of manavi interpretation. But this is going against the zahir. So we kind of be very careful in accepting these. There's a very nice article by William Chittick in Islamic Spirituality in regards to eschatology. I really wanted to bring that book today, but I have a PDF of it. I have promised last time as well I'll forward those essays, but I didn't. But inshallah this time I will do it. I'm sorry about that. So therefore, the ambiguous verses are interpreted not against the zahir. It cannot be. right? It will have some sort of, compatibility, So that is called the ambiguous, not mujmal in the sense that we don't know what it is. Like how in usuli or principle that we don't know. But Quran is very clear. Yes, there is a ambiguity, but this ambiguous nature is something pointing out to the in-depth understanding which is not against the zahir. So the apparent meaning of the Quran is clear, is well understood, and some of the ambiguous verses requires interpretation. Huwa al-awwal, huwa al-akhir, huwa al-zahir, huwa batin. It's a bit ambiguous, requires a bit of tafsir and explanation. And that is through the Ahl Bayt or through Rasikhuna fil ilm. Prophet tafsir is very important. Tafsir not by personal opinion, but by inspiration or by God himself. The first mufassir was who? Was the Prophet himself. When Quran talks about the dawn, the white line, and khat abiyad, and the black line, when they meet, for example, God says, oh, this means that when this line passes, Prophet is interpreting what the Quran is saying. It's a bit ambiguous for us to understand, but Prophet interprets. Then Amirul Mu'mineen, then Ibn Abbas. These are the mufassir. These are those who have done the tafsir of the Quran, who have interpreted the Quran. Not birrai, not purely whatever they think, right? But rather no. Like Suyuti, for example, there's tafsir by Suyuti, who brings the hadith from the Prophet himself to interpret. Among the Shias, there is tafsir Nur al-Thaqalain, which are based upon the hadith of the Masumin and Ahl Bayt himself. No doubt, because the Quran have many bathan, and these bathan have many bathan. But never we have seen that these bathan contradicts each other. It is pointing out to the different levels of students. Like for example, when we attend majalis, it is very easy for us to grasp what the speaker is speaking, because we are used to that trend. He will just do one ishara, like that everybody will nare ahdiri, because they know what's gonna come, about to come now. But somebody who comes from outside, what's going on? He will not understand, right? Because we know, in terms of the indication of what the speaker is saying. So same way the Ahl Bayt is aware of the in-depth reality of these, because they are the one who understands the deeper levels. But this is not contradicting the Zahiri aspect of it, of the Quran that is there. So if there be any questions, I think it's about 10 o'clock, isn't it? Is this correct, the time? Yeah, 55. 5 minutes, we'll have some questions. Yes?
In terms of ayahs, things like Yasin,
yes.
Only the Ahl Bayt knows the meaning, is that correct?
Yes, the Ahl Bayt alayhi salam are aware of these meanings of, huruf, muqaddam, disjointed words, letters. Yeah. The ulama have mentioned on the basis of the teachings of Ahl Bayt alayhim salam what they really mean, but the true meaning is they will be aware of that. What's the purpose of it, why they are there. It shows that even every letter is valuable, whether that be ya or sin or kaf or whatever.
How many are there in the Quran?
Do you know Brother Arif? No.
By heart?
No, I know. Yeah, there is.
We'll count them.
Yeah.
I can Google it now.
Yeah. So,
I was going to cheat.
yeah. Yes.
You know how you said, die before you die?
Mm-hmm.
And they said that there's a surah beyond the surah. So does that mean that this person experiences, he experiences this Qiyam surah in this world?
Yes.
Or what does that mean?
That means Qiyamah is basically resurrection of the truth, of Haqq. So he will see that Haqq on a primary level in this world itself. He see the reality, truth been risen. Instead of day of judgment, he will see while he is still sort of alive. And then on a greater level, he will see when he is about to depart from this world.
Does that give him does that include ilm al-ghayb?
Yes, indeed. I mean, ilm al-ghayb for us, because it's hidden from us, but it's right here, so to speak. It's and it becomes apparent for that person if that Qiyamah al-Sughra takes place. Yeah.
29 out of 114.
29 letters in total.
29 surahs starting from al-Muqaddaha out of 114.
Oh, okay. 29 surahs are starting, but not all huruf are there. Yeah. Some of the hurufs are there. Yeah.
So in terms of going deeper into a meaning of a verse, how would someone do that? Is it just because you read it as you read it, could you then be studying further and then doing tafsir and then getting more in depth about a verse?
That is correct, yes. Looking at different interpretation and tafsir, different points of views, and yes, some of them could be beyond, we will not accept them, but because Ahl Bayt haven't really mentioned.
Which is like the golden tafsir, that you recommend, the gold star tafsir?
I think we could start with basic tafasir, such as Agha Makarim Shirazi, for example. That's in Farsi. Maybe some of them is in English to begin with, and then probably Mizan is something. Study Quran is a good book as well. Study Quran, the recent English one, very briefly. It's not goes in detail, but it's good. Yeah.
Slightly different track. So it is recommended to do daily recitations of Quran. Different riwayat, but I've heard the common thing is that to recite 50 ayats every day rather than one ruku. So the question is, does the daily recitations of surahs like Surah Waqia, Surah Yasin, does that count towards that?
No. Yeah, because that is for a particular purpose and this is for a particular purpose. So it's always better to keep that as as a specific and separate act. It's like nawafil, we do nawafil and then we have other mustahab prayers as well.
So Sheikh, to clarify about the Qiyamah al-Sughra, do you mean to die as a physical death, or is it possible to also die while you are living?
Yes, that's what we mean. And the Prophet said, Mata, die before qabla an mut. Die before you die. While you are still living, while we are still living, I should completely disconnect myself. I should have no desires, as if I'm a dead body, so to speak. And wherever God wants to turn me, I should turn that way. So that's dying before dying. And then when a person dies, as he sees barzakh, while he's living, when he dies, he will see barzakh. He will already interact with barzakh, because he's no longer. Allama Tabatabai has a nice saying. He says, for the past 30 years, I've been in contact with a universe that is so apparent, or that is there, which most of the common people are unaware of. So, he is basically, living with them, speaking with them, interacting with them. which is far from us, because we tend to see in certain dimensions only, you know. Yeah. And the existence of Imam is very similar to that as well. You know, I mean, Barzakh is much more far, is more far than the Imam. Imam is something here in this world physically. Barzakh is more of a subtle nature, right?
Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you very much, inshallah. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alayhi tahirin. I request a Surah Fatiha for someone who's really ill. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him shifa and all other mu'mineen and mu'minat, inshallah. Al-Fatiha ma salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alayhim. Ahsantum. Thank you very much.
Please help yourself with the Baruch and Bay'ah.